Welcome back to Face the Nation. There is big news in our CBS News Battleground Tracker. That's our survey of the Democratic candidates and how they're doing in the early contest. There are 18 states in our aggregate, starting with the Iowa caucus up through Super Tuesday. And there is a big reshuffling in the top tier. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is now at 26% support, just ahead of former Vice President Joe Biden at 25%. The third candidate in our top tier is Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. He has 19% support. In the second tier, those are the candidates with higher single digits. California Senator Kamala Harris now has 8% support. South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg has 6%. Former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke has 4%, and former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro and New Jersey Senator Cory Booker are at 2%. The rest of the field comes in with 1% of the vote or less. Joining us now is CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, always good to have you here. Tell me about this reshuffling.
Well, this is a story of Elizabeth Warren rising, not necessarily Joe Biden falling. He is about where he has been. But her support and that boost she's getting is as a result of other candidates, now former supporters, moving to Elizabeth Warren. And we've seen this because in this survey, we've gone back and re-interviewed thousands of voters since the summer. And what we see is, in particular, from Kamala Harris, her supporters are now moving to Elizabeth Warren, and at twice the rate that they've moved to Joe Biden and to other candidates. So she's clearly picking up some of them. She's consolidating a little bit of the liberal side of the Democratic Party, and also her electability ratings are on the rise. She's 16 points higher in being perceived by Democrats as being electable, as being able to beat President Trump, and that's always been a key criteria. And lastly, Margaret, I want to emphasize, this is in those early 18 states that you mentioned where the campaigns are really focusing. They're the first ones to hold contests. And so that movement really reflects, I think, where the campaigns are putting their energy.
So Warren's gain is Harris's loss, but what does this mean for Joe Biden?
Well, there's still some good news here. He's still up in our delegate count. And here's what that means. I know it sounds like it's a far-off thing. There's the Democratic convention next summer. But ultimately, this campaign is a fight for delegates. And delegates are handed out to top finishers in all of these states, really any candidate that gets above 15%. Well, by the time you get through all of those states, Joe Biden is doing well enough. He's racking up a lot of delegates, a lot of votes in places like South Carolina, that he still has the overall delegate lead in that estimate when we take these vote preferences and we translate them into how the delegates would be awarded in the states.
So that's important still to actually clinching the nomination.
Yeah, by the time when you get to next summer and you're at the convention, the balloons drop. That's how the delegates are actually awarded to candidates.
So let's take a look at some of those key states.
Yeah.
And we have them here. We'll bring them up on the screen. Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. What are they telling you?
Iowa is tight. It's still with Biden ahead, just narrowly over Bernie Sanders. But then some news out of New Hampshire, where we know that Elizabeth Warren has been really ramping up, staffing up, campaigning a lot. She is now very narrowly ahead of Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. That's effectively a three-way race there. South Carolina, I mentioned, Joe Biden still has a substantial lead there. African-American support, really critical. And then in Nevada, often overlooked, but an important early primary, we've got Bernie Sanders narrowly up on Joe Biden.
So with this information, what do people do with it? What do they predict going forward?
I think what you watch is who has room to move and room to grow, by which I mean, are candidates being considered by voters, even if those voters aren't making them their first choice yet. And what we see is that Elizabeth Warren does seem to have even more room to grow because she's being considered now by more than half of Democratic voters, even the ones who aren't making her their first choice. When they describe the candidates, she's seen as electable or increasingly electable, but that's still Joe Biden's strong suit. He's still seen as the most.
Means
being able to beat President Trump in the minds of Democrats, and that's really been a top criteria for them. They want somebody they think can go on next November 2020 and beat President Trump.
Thanks so much, Anthony Salvanto. And as always, all of the results are available on our website at facethenation.com.